Like a trusted turnout jacket you've had for years, Flex 7 outer shell fabric delivers a perfectly broken-in feel on the very first wear. Flexible, comfortable, and powered with the strength of Enforce technology, Flex 7 outer shell fabric is made to move. To learn more, visit tencataffabrics.com/flex7. Flex 7, powered by Enforce technology, only from TenCate Protective Fabrics.
Seconds count when responding to an emergency. Minutes save count when documenting your day. Emergency Networking makes records management easier and faster with its Fire and EMS solution. User-friendly, complete online and offline functionality, highly customizable, all at an affordable price. For more information, please visit emergencynetworking.com.
Welcome to 5 After Midnight. It's a new show where we talk about the things the way you would around a sleep-deprived kitchen table. When you've run 5 or more calls after midnight, your brain feels half gone, and you and your crew have absolutely no filter. Just pure honesty. The goal of this series is to kick around the small things that really aren't so small and have a big impact in the way our firehouses function. My name is Stephanie. I'm genuinely not an expert at anything. I'm just here to ask the sometimes awkward questions. Enjoy.
Come too far, don't let this slip away. Fade out like they said we would.
Well, I am joined today by my guest, Chris Fields. Those of you in the peer mental health world will recognize that name. But if you are not in that world, that might not be a name that's familiar with you at all. So, Chris, I want you to go ahead and just right off the bat, introduce your organization and what it is that you do, and then we'll get into a little bit more.
Okay. Well, my name is Chris Fields. I'm part of the organization. You talking about Trauma Behind the Badge. It's 4 guys or 5 guys that all retired first responders, with some of them with military experience. And what we do is, man, we just take care of first responders and vets and everything that are seeking any help for issues. We just believe that a first responder or a veteran's life is not to be compromised, and we do whatever it takes to get them where they need to be.
And Chris, you retired from Oklahoma City with 31 years of service, 30 years?
Yes, I was hired July 12th of 1985. That's a long time ago.
We won't mention where I was.
I did.
It was 10 days before I was born.
Don't. Yeah, I was going to say, probably you may not have been born. But, I did 31 years and 7 months, and I retired March 1st of 2017 was my last day. So I've been retired just a little over 6 years.
Well, Chris, the reason that I reached out to you was you have a story that all of us, despite not knowing your name, actually know a little about. If you especially grew up in the 90s, which I did, and that is
right.
Working for Oklahoma City during that time period, you were a first responder to the Oklahoma City bombing. And you were the firefighter in that very iconic picture that we have all seen, holding that small child right after that domestic terrorism act. And that's something that I think is very specific to especially kids growing up in the 90s, because that was the first time I think any of us had seen such an attack on our homeland soil. We saw it overseas, right, and we never thought it would happen here. So that was something that I think stuck in a lot of my generation's mind, but something that I think is very unique to you and to your story is that you were one of the first, I think, and one of the few to experience a level of trauma that I think we're just now starting to experience, which is the memories can now follow us everywhere because there are pictures and there's social media and there's video. And unlike the past, these things aren't going away. And you had that bizarre experience in your life because that picture went far and wide. It went everywhere. And what I really wanted to about today was, how do you handle something like that? That's such a unique experience.
Yeah, it was a very unique experience, and I often when I when I get the opportunity and blessed to go speak somewhere, or if I'm doing a podcast, whatever, I always mention, even for all the responders for that day in 1995, what was unique about it was the fact that we all, and everybody goes through this around the country that makes significant calls, especially locally. We relived it every day for months on with the television coverage, and rightfully so. It deserved every minute of the coverage the victims did, and the families. But it was unique that you could not, even as a responder, a month, even after the building was imploded and everything, you're still taken back to that day. At least not even if not in your own memories, it's put in front of you every day on the media, in the media, on local news and stuff like that. So it was unique for everybody in that aspect. As far as the photo of me and Bailey, I think the first time we talked initially, we talked about the, if there had been social media back then like there is now, I just can't imagine. I cannot imagine the results of that. But it is very unique that it's something I was talking with my oldest son the other day, and I made the comment. I said, I'm blessed from that photo. I get the opportunity to speak to first responders. That's where I get my platform. It's not my whole story, but I told him, I said, it's something I just had to accept. I guess that photo will follow me until the day they put me in, put me in the ground, which is something. It's kind of amazing to think about. But, it didn't come without its struggles, and not just all the trauma from the job and the trauma from the bombing, but the trauma of that photo and seeing it all the time, and, what people were thinking about it and all that. One of the things that's really helped me, though, is I'm good friends with Erin Allman. That the baby I was holding was Bailey Allman, and Erin is her mother. Still good friends, stay in contact with Erin and her family. She's had 2 more children since then, and we've always stayed in touch. And we had our public information officer at the time was Chief John Hanson. Passed away a couple of years ago from cancer, but he was like a wall for me through all that, because I didn't know how to. I'd never spoke in front of more than just my guys and girls at the station until after that, after that photo came out. I was really struggling with being singled out and all that. And he just told me, he said, "Hey man, you're getting the opportunity to represent the fire service, not the Oklahoma City Fire, the fire service." He said, that photo, you're representing every first responder that was on the call that day, no matter what agency they're affiliated with. And Bailey is representing every victim and the innocence that was lost that day. So that's kind of, how I kind of look at it. And like you said, most people don't know, you say Chris Fields, firefighter, there's like, okay, he's a firefighter named Chris Fields. But when they talk about the photo, so that kind of helps, it's not like it's about Chris Fields. It's about that photo and what it represents. So that's made it a little easier to handle and to deal with. And then, like I say, then I get this platform to speak from that, and I have the blessing of Erin Allman, Bailey's mom, to use that photo and do it. So
one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you about that photo in this way is I had a really bizarre experience probably about 2 years ago now, where I ran a call that a young kid ran away and ended up committing suicide pretty grotesquely, and the family obviously found him after a while, and they were on scene and leaning in the cop car window getting this young child's information. I had my phone in my pocket, and I didn't think twice about it. And after the call actually ended up being right near where at the time I lived, and I have young children, and
Oh,
just phone Big Brother being what it is, it, I guess, overheard the entire conversation between me and the police officer, getting name, date of birth, everything. And when I opened my social media later in that day, it had all that information, all the articles about that young child at the top of my news feed. And it was a completely different experience because we run these calls, we see this sadness, we see the family, we see the devastation, but then we go off the call and we have our routine for de-escalating. But now this was an entirely new element to it that I in no way, shape, or form was prepared for. I wasn't prepared for my social media device, not news, not even news, just logging on to Facebook expecting to see funny memes and first day of school pictures, and I'm confronted with the call that I just ran. And it triggered something inside me that I was not prepared for. It really humanized a call that in that moment I had actively put my normal safeguards up to handle the parents and the scene and all that. How did you personally handle that part of it? The just seeing it. I know you just talked about the picture and what it represents, but you had to have, I'm sure, built in some different safeguards after going through that experience.
I did. And, I'll be honest with you. I just really, other than, I did my best to avoid it, I guess I would say, for quite a while. Other than if somebody called about doing an interview, if Erin was doing an interview, I'd do it with her. But I think it was a difficult time. And like I said, it was, I really did my best to avoid it. But like you, we still, and that was just a little different. There wasn't the normal, dark humor and the stuff gallows humor that we use to help deflect, which is, to me, I always say this, and I don't want people to take it wrong. That's perfectly fine. That's just what we do. It's how we cope, especially in a 24-hour shift, so you can get ready for the next call,
Right.
That's just one of our coping mechanisms. But for that, not just that photo, but for the Oklahoma City bombing, and maybe because it was so
Violating.
homegrown and right, there wasn't a whole lot of that. The local media here was pretty sensitive to not showing that photo a whole lot. National media, and of course they don't live here, so it doesn't affect them as personally. So it was it got thrown up all the time, and I'll be honest with you, every time I saw that photo come up, my first thought would be, I wonder if Erin's seeing this. I wonder if Erin's watching this newscast. I wonder. That's like the first time I even saw the photo. The next morning, I didn't find out about the photo till 11 o'clock that night, the night of the bombing. I didn't see it for the first time until the next morning. Of course, I didn't know Erin then. I didn't know her name was Bailey. I didn't know any of that. But my first thought when I saw that photo splashed on the newspaper and all the magazines was, I wonder if that family even knows that that's their child, that their child's deceased, That was kind of my first thought. So really, that's what ate at me the most, and was part of my trauma journey. Was I was so concerned about every time they showed that, because Erin was a 20-year-old mother that lost her only child, and that would be my first thought every time was, I wonder if Erin's seeing this. I wonder if Erin saw that magazine, or saw this article, or saw this story on the national news. So, and it was just it was like we always do, Stephanie. I just put up that that mask and acted like I was good to go, and that's just how I coped with it. I just deflected it and put the mask on and went to work and acted like everything was good, and inside it was just eating me up.
I went earlier today because I was trying to remember what year that the Oklahoma City bombing was. And all I did was Google Oklahoma City bombing. And I think that was about the fifth picture down.
Right.
And it's like you said, the national media did not care, and it was out there, and it was everywhere. So you went through this experience, and you kind of had to figure out a brand new blueprint, essentially, because mental health was not a thing in the 90s. Some places might have had CISM teams, and those,
Right.
I was introduced to those when I joined the fire department in the very early 2000s. Good intentioned, not the best model in the world. So you probably had to put together your own blueprint for how to handle that. Is that what you've gone and taken on into the organization that you now are involved in?
Yeah, and that's pretty accurate. Of the '90s, it was. Yeah, we had our own either CISM or CISD team, whatever they were called. It was not, the term peer support wasn't used, and like I say, it was so new. It was just so new that everybody didn't know. I guess I don't know. It was kind of an unorganized chaos, I guess I would say. Trying to get a CISM team together and peer support. I love the way peer support's kind of taken over, and everybody's more comfortable with maybe talking to their peers. But the CISM team, it's we had a few issues in the beginning with ours that some of the guys would spill after the bombing. We were after each shift we had to go through a debriefing before we went back to station, and there's a few stories that leaked out from the debriefing from our own people. So that's when everybody kind of shut down. That was kind of the end of that deal. And everybody didn't know who was on the CISM team. Now everybody knows who peer support people are and all that. So it was just kind of and the city did, and the fire department did everything they knew to do at that time. So, there's no, you won't hear me saying, I don't feel like I was betrayed by the fire department, and the police department, which is pretty common these days, organizational betrayal and all that kind of stuff. They did everything they knew to do. It was just a new thing. And that's exactly why myself and my other buddies do what we do, is to spread the word about trauma in our position, and you can vouch for this, in our profession, not our position, in our profession. There is no way you will not be exposed to trauma. You can't avoid it.
Right.
And it's maybe not necessarily the trauma that brings you down or gets you, it's how you carry that trauma. And so I think we just like to spread the word, tell our stories that, you will experience trauma, and it's okay. And every feeling that you're going to feel, physically, emotionally, spiritually, whatever feeling you come up with, is perfectly a normal human reaction. That's just how we're wired. I think I'd be more worried about the person that has a 25, 30-year career and has no emotions at all. I think I would be a little more worried about them than I would the one who the trauma does affect them. But like I say, it's just the different ways to carry that trauma and cope with that trauma.
How do you think we can teach this new technology generation? So, I use this example when talking about kids and bullying. It used to be, we ran home, closed the front door, and if you wanted to get a hold of me, you had to go through whoever answered the phone, an older sibling, my parents. Like, you had to have the cojones to call somebody's house up to continue bullying them. And it's
Right.
the same kind of thing now. So calls are following us, social media, phones listening in. We cannot get away from it.
Right.
How do we teach people to put this safeguard in place? Because we all have this just diabolical curiosity, right? Where we see a hint of something that we were just involved in, and we get really curious about it, so we continue to look. And the damage that can do is, I don't think we think about it until we're deep in the mire of, okay, why did I just do that? Now I've humanized something.
Right.
what safeguards would you say we should put in place to modify that behavior? Because we all have that dark curiosity. How do we save ourselves from ourselves when it comes to that?
Right. Golly, Steph, I don't know if there's really any, because everybody is so different. I don't know if there's any safeguards you can really put in place, but you'd have to tell somebody
Just don't do it.
if well, yeah, well, I would say if just like anything, if it affects you negatively, and that, you've got to be able to just not look at it. And if it does, or if you feel like that does help you, have somebody that you can call and talk to about it, or and like you said, with all the technology anymore, there's so many anonymous sources out there you can reach out to, and talk to people. There's like people do counseling now on the over Teledoc and Zoom and all that kind of stuff, and so I wouldn't necessarily maybe not encourage them not to look, but I maybe say, have a plan in place. Just like, when you travel, everybody's got your emergency contact. Everybody's got this, knows how to get hold of you. Here's who they call if, you probably have an emergency contact when if Stephanie's in a car wreck, call this person. Or when you go to the doctor, who's your emergency contact? I think everybody should just have a list like that of who you would call or who you need to call if something triggers you. Because like I say, social media is so prevalent. It does not.
It's intrusive.
You can try to avoid something, and you're going to see it. You can try to avoid something, and you're going to see it. And there's an article about it, or there's a picture or a headline about it. It doesn't matter where you turn.
Right.
So I would say it was just one of them deals. If you know it's going to trigger you and affect you negatively, then you just have to avoid it. But if not, if you feel like you need to see it, you need to process it, you need to read it or feel it or whatever that is to you, that make sure you have, a plan in place if it does trigger you. That would be my advice.
It's so crazy because I think, especially any kind of trauma, we don't know what a person looks like half the time. And
Right.
to me, I think that's been a new level of shock, is seeing people in the state that we find them in and going about our day. And then we suddenly,
Right.
we see what they looked like as a happy, normal human being. And that's a completely different type of humanization that we're not used to. It appears on the
Right. And that's what's crazy about the social media world. If you of course, like I'm on 80s, there wasn't even, I think I had a pager. I don't remember cell phones, but it was but now, and like I said, everything is just thrown in our face through social media, regular media. There's local news, national news, and it's different in the fact too that if you made I'll throw out a car wreck. You make a fatality car wreck, and if you happen to get their names, depends on where you're involved with in the incident. As an officer, I would be gathering information, so I might know their name. Even if not, even if you see it on the news, a fatality car wreck, and they give the name of who passed away, now you can just, if you want to, you go to Facebook and hit Facebook just to look them up to see who they were and what they're about, and you find out, man, here's this great, dad of 3 daughters, and he did all these charitable stuff, and he was this great dad, and he was, killed by some drunk driver, So, I mean, it opens up so many more, I would say, triggers, I guess, that if you go down that road to where, 1990, I make a fatality car wreck, you may see it on the news, you may not, but then, there's no really way to follow up, that was just how it was. But now there's so many avenues to look people up and to find out, you make a full arrest. We used to load them in the ambulance, the ambulance take them to the hospital. We'd never know whether they, ended up living or dying. unless we called specifically called the hospital to follow up. Well, now, shoot, all you got to do is Google up a name. It'll tell you if they're, deceased or not. And so it's just it's just a totally different world.
I think this sterilization is gone. I was taught when I first came in, don't follow up on your patients unless it's some weird, bizarre call, and then curiosity takes over. But otherwise, I never had my officers who followed up on anything. They didn't want to know, and you could keep that work humanity. Obviously, there's some calls where you can't avoid the human interest side of it, and that takes over. But they really taught you to be so sterilized with it, and we're melding these two worlds now.
Right, and I don't mind the like the being sterile, and you got to learn to pack it away so you can be ready for the next call. But we do have to say, we need to do that, but we also need to be able to know that you can talk about it if you want to. Now you make back to back calls, of course, you're putting it in a place where you can keep doing your job. If there comes a time and place, it needs to be where everybody needs to know that they can talk about it. And it's tough to keep a totally sterile environment, because I believe personally, this is Chris Fields' beliefs, when you do the job we do, you have to have a heart for this job, and you have to have a heart to do this job.
That's true.
If you're an old crusty-hearted person, everything, it's gonna be I mean,
long career.
You're gonna, yeah. So I think I love. This gonna sound weird. I don't want to say I love when guys and girls that work for me were affected by a call. That's not what I mean to say, but
shows that they still have a heart.
I'm glad that they have a heart, and they show empathy and sympathy. And you make a call with a mother and two little girls, maybe the two little girls on scene. Yeah, I'm glad to see that heart and that compassion in them for this job, because that's the people. Because man, I hate worse than I hate horrible bedside manner on a call, because I don't care. Man, I've never written anybody up when I was on the job. But only a few times I've ever pulled a firefighter that worked for me in my office to say, hey, I appreciate you. You don't want to get involved, and you're trying to be this, but the bedside manner of some of these people, because they try to remain so sterile and disconnected from the call, is just, to me, it's horrendous. So it's and that's changed. When I got on in 1985, it was I was raised by some tough old smoke eaters, and it wasn't that they were callous-hearted or didn't have empathy or something. It's just the way they were raised on the fire service. That's just the way it was. And I see that that's changed quite a bit, but it is different, and it's hard not to, like you said, it's hard not to want to know, because we are human. The curiosity takes over, and then the compassion and the heart for the job you do takes over. So it's a hard act to balance.
I think we're at such a tipping point right now, because when my generation came in, it was very much, my first officer, one of my first officers let me know, hey, if you need to talk to somebody about these calls, you're in the wrong line of work. And that was the mentality for the first maybe 5 to 7 years of my career. And then we've really started to have a switch between the generations. I feel like, and I know every generation before me has said this, so I'm falling into that sin. But there's such a difference between myself and the newer generation coming in. Not bashing them in any way, but they're more in touch with feelings and thoughts and emotions.
Right, they're more open to talk.
They really are. So I'm so curious to see what peer teams are going to look like over the next 5 to 7 years. And if we're going to have to come back and say, hey, talking about our feelings is great and amazing, and having a healthy mindset and treating the brain just like an ankle. If you sprain your brain, go take care of it. If you see something
Right.
absolutely abnormally devastating, talk to somebody about it. But remember that we are in the business of
Right.
seeing these things. And we
Right.
do need to tuck that away in the back of our mind of, it's going to be interesting to watch that line being straddled of,
Yeah, and there's always, and it doesn't matter what it is. Firefighters find a way to run about anything.
if
That's what I've
that's
always
not the
said.
truth.
A restaurant gives you a discount. You let some guy go in there in his uniform shirt on his day off just to get a half off of a hamburger, and that'll end up ruining it for everybody. And that's what.
Every
but there's
time.
always going to be those. Yeah, there's always going to be those that want to. I don't say take advantage of, but you got a guy or girl who's coming back and needing 2 mental days because they went on a spider bite call. You're going to have those ones that want to, just see how far they can push it. And we had a chief one time. We were going to go speak at a deal. This was several years back when I was going to go speak at a deal by myself in a small area in Louisiana, and the chief didn't want me to come speak. Told his union, "No, I don't want to come speak." He said, because once he comes speaks, everybody will be lined up saying they got the PTSD and they need off. I'm going, well, it's not like the flu. You don't catch it, It's and you don't find that many people lining up to publicly say, "Hey, this is affecting me mentally," So it runs the gamut of like you said, you had one officer tell you, if you feel like you need to talk about calls, then you're probably in the wrong line of work. To ones that probably take it too far the other way. But they talk about after every call, no matter the severity, we're going to come back and talk about, that'll drive people away from wanting to talk about a call bothering them also.
Mm-hmm. Well, Chris, thank you so much for having this conversation. You clearly had to master resiliency back in 1995 in order to be able to continue on. Give me 2 things that to the new guy or gal, or even the older guy and gal, what 2 things would you tell them that they need to hold fast to and always practice when it comes to their resiliency? Putting you on the spot completely.
Yeah, no. The practice resiliency is just to say that, like I said, it's not necessarily the trauma that's going to bring you down. It's how you carry it, how you deal with it. It's so, I don't know good grammar, but it's so okay to reach out and talk to somebody, and I always want to tell them, I don't care if you do 15 years, 30 years, or 40 years. Yes, your title is firefighter, but it's not who you are. It's what you do. That's not saying when you're on the job you don't be the best at whatever your profession is, but it shouldn't define who you are. At the end of the day, your family and your friends are going to be there at the end of the day when you walk off that job. So you want to make sure that you're taking care of yourself so you can take care of them at the end of the day.
True words. Thank you, Chris. Thank you for everything that you've stepped up and done after that life experience. Thank you for all the teaching you've done, and thank you for all the road you've paved for your peer teams that are up and coming and starting to follow in your footsteps. So thank you for making it better for the rest of us.
Well, thank you, Stephanie. Thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for what you do, having this podcast and spreading the word. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris.